My mother called me the family's biggest disappointment and smiled like it was nothing. My brother laughed. My father stayed silent. 3 years, no calls. Last week they invited me home for Thanksgiving. I went back, but not to forgive them. Hi, I'm Claire. The last time I saw my mother, she told me I was an embarrassment in front of an entire dinner party. My brother lifted his wine glass and said, "Well, someone had to say it." My father, he didn't speak, just looked at me like I'd spilled something on his reputation. That night, I packed my bags and left their brownstone in Chicago's Gold Coast. I didn't slam the door, I didn't cry, I just walked. I didn't expect to hear from them again. Not really, not after the years of subtle cuts dressed as concern, of being told my voice was too sharp, my ideas too ambitious. But then it came, in the mail, a letter, handwritten in looping cursive, expensive thick cream stock, sealed with a wax crest I hadn't seen since my childhood, the Laramie family seal. Dearest Claire, we hope you'll join us for Thanksgiving this year, 2:30 p.m., Thursday, the Lake House. Love always, Mom. Love always. Those 2 words sat on the page like a dare. I held the letter in one hand and my ceramic mug in the other. The mug said, "Peace is not permission." I'd bought it during therapy sometime after I turned 35, sometime after I stopped asking for apologies that wouldn't come. It had been 4 years since I'd been invited to anything. Not after I refused to sign over my shares in the family foundation, not after I told them I wouldn't co-sign a loan for my brother's failing digital agency, not after I publicly called out the misuse of donor funds at the Laramie Foundation Gala in front of the mayor. But now, this, an olive branch, a trap? I closed my eyes and let the silence of my Brooklyn apartment wash over me. The streetlight flickered. My cat Marlowe blinked lazily from the windowsill. I thought about not going, but part of me, the part that still remembered how the lake smelled in October, the way the guest room felt like childhood and cedarwood, that part whispered, what if this time is different? I booked the Amtrak for Tuesday morning. I wore a blue wool coat, one my mother used to say made me look like a politician's assistant. I wore it anyway. Underneath, I chose a vintage navy dress I'd gotten from a thrift store in Rome. It made me feel anchored. The train ride to Michigan was long, gray, quiet. Outside the window, the autumn leaves blurred into burnt orange and brittle gold. A woman across from me applied lipstick with shaking hands. I didn't ask why. We all carry something. When I arrived at the lake house, nothing had changed. The path was still lined with manicured hedges. The porch still creaked in the same spot, 3rd plank from the left. But the welcome mat was new. It used to read, "All are welcome here." Now it said, "Know your place." A man I didn't recognize opened the door. Slim, suited, iPad in hand. "Name?" "Claire Laramie," I replied flatly. He nodded, stepped aside. Inside, the house smelled like rosemary, bay leaves, and bread, almost comforting, until I saw the seating chart taped to the entry mirror. Mom, Dad, Caleb, my brother, Claire, guest, far end. I swallowed hard. There were 50 people in the house. Some I remembered, old family friends, distant cousins, board members. No one greeted me. No one even looked up. Until she did, my mother, in pearls and posture, arms extended like a hostess from a 1960s magazine spread. "Well, look who's come crawling home," she said, loudly enough to stop the hum of conversation. There was laughter, tight, polite, rehearsed. I smiled politely, didn't speak. I took my seat at the far end, a folding chair, slightly unstable. Dinner began. The turkey was perfect. The wine flowed. The stories circled the table like nothing had ever happened. No one spoke to me. It was like being a shadow in my own family's celebration. Then I heard it, the clink of her fork against her wineglass. Tap, tap. All eyes turned to her, even mine, and I knew this wasn't a reunion, this was a performance. This was a warning, and I had just stepped back onto their stage. The dining room looked exactly the same chandelier with the cracked crystal drop on the left, same heavy oak table polished within an inch of its life, same chairs with those outdated maroon cushions my mother refused to replace because they were real Italian velvet, and yet nothing felt familiar. I took my seat at the end of the table, the one labeled guest, far end. No place card with my name, just a folded napkin and a wine glass that hadn't been filled, not even water. Conversations floated past me like I wasn't there. Someone mentioned Caleb's podcast hitting 10,000 followers. Another gushed about Mom's recent interview in Midwest Living. My name never came up, not once. I smiled politely when someone made a joke about the good old days, but no one noticed. I could have been wallpaper. Dinner was served at 4 p.m. sharp. A line of uniformed staff brought out the dishes, each one perfect: rosemary turkey, garlic mashed potatoes, fig-glazed carrots, cranberry sauce shaped like a sculpture. It was the kind of meal made for photos, not for family. As I reached for the breadbasket, I noticed it. A hush that fell over the table like a dropped curtain. My mother stood up, slow, intentional, the way someone does when they've been waiting for the spotlight. She tapped her fork against her wine glass. Once, twice, 3 times. The room went silent. Even the servers paused mid-step. She smiled. Not the kind that reaches the eyes. The kind that stretches thin like ice over a frozen pond. "Before we dive into dessert," she said, "I just want to say a few words." I sat straighter, trying to seem unaffected, but my spine tensed without asking permission. "I look around this table," she continued, her voice calm and poised, "and I see loyalty. I see family that understands tradition, that respects boundaries." I felt the heat rise in my chest. Her eyes didn't look directly at me, but they didn't need to. Everyone knew who her words were meant for. "Because in every family," she went on, "there comes a time when someone forgets who they are, where they come from, and worse, what they owe." A polite chuckle rippled across the table. "Some daughters," she said, "mistake independence for arrogance. They think success excuses betrayal. But family isn't a negotiation, it's a commitment." More laughter. I couldn't tell if they agreed or were just afraid not to. I didn't speak, I didn't move. Then came the line I knew she'd been rehearsing. "Money doesn't buy respect, and entitlement is never pretty, especially not on someone who shares your blood." That's when Caleb clapped. 3 slow, mocking claps. 1, 2, 3. "Bravo, Mom," he said. That one was poetic. I stared at my untouched plate. The cranberry sauce glistened like glass. I pushed my chair back quietly, stood up without a word. And just as I turned to leave the room, it happened. A crack, a sound so sharp it split the silence in half. Her hand, my face, she'd slapped me, hard, open palm, left side. Gasps erupted, a fork dropped. Somewhere a wine glass tipped over. I didn't react. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just looked at her, then at him, then at the room full of people who had watched it happen and said nothing. And then came my father's voice, flat, careless, without looking up from his plate. "Serves you right." That was the moment I knew. This wasn't just about being excluded. It wasn't even about power. This was punishment. For not falling in line, for daring to walk away, for surviving without them. I walked out, slowly, without a coat, without looking back. The November air hit my skin like cold glass, but I didn't flinch. I sat on the front steps of the lake house, hands in my lap, eyes fixed on the still water beyond the trees. No one followed me. No one called my name, not even to keep up appearances. And for the first time, I wasn't sad. I was clear. I hadn't lost my family. I'd simply stopped pretending they were one. The stars had started to come out. I sat on the stone steps, arms wrapped around myself, my cheeks still stinging. But it wasn't the pain that held me still. It was the silence. The kind of silence you only hear after something breaks. A few windows upstairs were lit. Laughter floated faintly from the dining room. Someone turned music on. Something upbeat, something completely detached from what just happened. I didn't cry. I thought I might. But there was nothing left to cry for. They hadn't just disrespected me. They'd made a public example of me, like a child being scolded in front of strangers, like I was still 10 years old. But I wasn't 10 anymore. I was 37. I paid my own rent, ran my own design firm, built my own life, and yet they still saw me as someone they could mold, control, shame. I reached into my coat pocket, pulling out a single object, a flash drive. It had been in my apartment drawer for 3 years. I almost threw it away a dozen times, but something always stopped me. And now, sitting under the cold Michigan sky, I knew why. It was time. I pulled out my phone, scrolled past the usual names, found the one labeled only as Dorian, legal. It rang twice before he answered. "Claire?" "Yeah," I said. My voice was calm, too calm. "Is it time?" There was a long pause on my end. I looked at the lake, perfectly still, a reflection of a world that only looked peaceful on the surface. "Yes," I whispered. "It's time." The next morning, I didn't leave. Not yet. Instead, I sat in the guest house, a smaller building at the back of the property, where old furniture and holiday decorations went to die. It had been my childhood refuge, the place I hid when my parents fought about money, about image, about me. I pulled out my laptop, plugged in the flash drive. A folder popped up. Audio. October 2018. My heart beat louder. Inside were 6 voice memos, all recorded by one person, my grandfather, Walter Laramie. Before he died, he'd developed a habit of dictating thoughts aloud into an old-school recorder, rambling messages, business ideas, notes for his will, and confessions. I clicked play. If they ever hear this, I'm sorry, but I don't trust them. Not Linda, not Caleb. They've changed the numbers, altered the books. The foundation is no longer about helping people. It's about helping themselves. My hands clenched. Claire. She's the only one who stood up to them. I may not agree with everything she's done, but she's honest. She's not for sale. The next audio file was even clearer. I signed a revision to the trust, quietly, left my original intentions with my lawyer, not Caleb. Claire is to inherit the controlling vote. It's time someone with a spine took the wheel. I sat there staring at the screen. The room felt heavier, like the truth had weight. All this time, they'd treated me like a threat, because I was one. Not because I was loud or defiant, but because I had something they didn't. Proof. They thought I'd walked away quietly, but I'd simply waited for the right moment. That moment had come. By noon, Dorian had filed the motion. By evening, a legal freeze was placed on the foundation's primary account. And by the time dessert was being served at the main house, a courier arrived at the front gate with an envelope. My mother opened it in front of everyone. Motion to initiate audit and injunction. Laramie Foundation, signed by Claire Laramie. She didn't read it aloud, but the look on her face said everything. Shock, disbelief, fear. Not because I was being petty, but because I had played by their rules and still beat them at their own game. I didn't show up for the second dinner that night. Instead, I made tea in the guest house. Rooibos with honey. The kind I liked. The kind no one else in the family ever drank. And for the first time in years, I felt it. Not revenge, not victory. Power. Without apology. The envelope changed everything. By the next morning, the lake house wasn't quiet anymore. It buzzed. Not with laughter, but with low voices, closed doors, and forced smiles. The kind of smiles people wear when lawyers are involved. I stayed in the guest house, slept lightly, made my own breakfast, coffee, toast, apricot jam. I didn't step foot inside the main house again. At 9:17 a.m., my phone rang. Dorian. "You ready for this?" I nodded instinctively, then realized he couldn't see me. "Yes," I said, "let's do it." We arrived at Laramie and Company, legal at 11 o'clock sharp, a quiet gray building in downtown Chicago, sterile, discreet, a place designed to hide big decisions behind bigger doors. Inside, seated at a long glass table, were my mother, Caleb, and the family's longtime attorney, Richard Cole. He was nearly 70, tall, thinning hair, always in a charcoal suit and an expression that said, "I've seen worse." He greeted me with a measured nod. "Claire, thank you for coming." My mother didn't look at me. Caleb smirked, then looked back down at his phone like this was just another board meeting. Dorian placed a small silver USB drive on the table. "Mr. Cole, We request you play the audio from Walter Laramie, dated October 2018. It concerns inheritance directives and potential misappropriation of foundation funds. Cole hesitated for a breath, then nodded. Understood. He plugged it in. The same voice I'd heard alone in the guest house now echoed across the sleek walls of the legal office. I don't trust them. Linda, Caleb, they've altered the books. My mother stiffened. Caleb looked up. Claire. She's the only one who's honest. She gets the vote. I've arranged everything with Richard. Cole paused the audio. The room was silent. My mother finally spoke, her voice colder than the marble floors beneath us. This isn't real. He was old, confused. He wouldn't... It's real, Cole interrupted calmly. He recorded it in my office. I witnessed it. And yes, Mrs. Laramie, he updated the trust, quietly, as per his rights. She blinked once. No tears, just rage. Controlled, curated rage. And you didn't think to tell us? He asked for confidentiality, Cole said, until such a time that the Foundation's mission was, in his words, compromised by vanity and greed. I looked at her then. I mean, really looked. The way you look at someone you've feared for too long, and finally realize they're just human. She didn't look powerful now. She looked cornered. Caleb, however, wasn't finished. You can't prove misuse, he snapped. We followed protocol. We'll let the IRS decide, Dorian said calmly. Caleb's face went pale. Cole leaned forward. Effective immediately, Claire Laramie holds controlling vote over the Foundation Board. Pending a formal audit, financial operations are frozen. My mother stood, slowly, gathered her purse like a queen stripped of her crown. You think this makes you strong? She whispered. I met her eyes. No, I said. I think walking away made me strong. This question mark. This just makes things fair. She walked out. Caleb followed, slamming the door behind him. That night, I returned to my apartment in Brooklyn. It was quiet. Still smelled like lavender and old books. Marlo rubbed against my ankle as I took off my coat. I set my phone down. It buzzed once. A message from an unknown number. You may have won the vote, but you'll always be the outsider. C. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my email, drafted a letter to the Foundation staff, to the donors, to the press. Dear colleagues, as of today, I've assumed interim leadership of the Laramie Foundation. Our mission remains unchanged, dignity, equity, and access. But our standards, financial and moral, will rise. Sincerely, Claire Laramie. I hit send, closed the laptop, took a deep breath, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was fighting to be heard. I was leading. I woke up at 5:40 the next morning, not from an alarm, but from something else. A kind of stillness in my body I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't adrenaline, it wasn't fear, it was clarity. I wrapped myself in a sweater, made a cup of rooibos tea, and stepped out onto the balcony. The city was still dark, a faint blush of dawn pressing against the sky. No sirens, no emails, no accusations, just the soft breath of morning and one simple, unfamiliar feeling. Peace. But peace, I knew, wouldn't last. By noon, the headlines had started. Laramie Foundation faces leadership shakeup. Internal audit launched after board dispute. Granddaughter of founder takes control amid scandal. I didn't give interviews. I didn't post anything on social media. I didn't need to. Because I'd learned something over the years. The truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs to stand. At 2:03 p.m., I received an email from Elaine, our former executive director. She'd been quietly pushed out 2 years ago, right after raising concerns about financial mismanagement. My mother had called her too negative and not aligned with the vision. Elaine's message was short. Claire, I've waited a long time for this. Don't let them silence you like they did me. I kept everything.
If you need the files, they're yours. E. I closed my eyes. It wasn't joy I felt. It was confirmation that I hadn't imagined it, that I hadn't been overly emotional or dramatic. I had simply been right. 3 days later, I held my first board meeting as acting chair. It wasn't dramatic, no yelling, no heated accusations, just quiet tension. Some board members avoided eye contact. A few looked mildly amused, like they expected me to stumble. Others, they were watching, curious. I didn't open with a speech, I opened with a projector. Slide by slide, I laid out what I'd found. Financial reports from the past 5 years, unexplained vendor payments, Caleb's inflated salary, donation mismatches flagged by the IRS. No one interrupted. Then I spoke. If we're serious about this foundation, about serving the communities we claim to care about, then transparency cannot be optional. Starting today, I propose an independent audit of all financial activity, a full public statement to our donors, and that all senior staff, including myself, disclose any and all conflicts of interest. Silence. Then, a few claps, polite, hesitant, but genuine. That night, I went home and opened a box I had left sealed for over 2 years, one my mother had mailed after cutting off all contact. I had never dared to open it. I assumed it was just old clothes, childhood trophies, or passive-aggressive notes. But near the bottom, between a cracked snow globe and an old family photo, I found something unexpected, a handwritten letter from my grandfather. Claire, if you're reading this, then you've chosen to stand. I always believed you would. You were the only one who understood the difference between legacy and reputation. They will say you broke the family, but really, you just stopped letting it break you. Don't let them bend your truth. With pride, Granddad, I held the letter against my chest, not because I needed his forgiveness, but because finally I knew he had seen me, even once. A few days later, Caleb sent a meeting request. No lawyers, no press, just the two of us. He picked a coffee shop near River North, neutral ground. He was thinner than before, less polished. No smug smirk this time, just exhaustion. Claire, he started. I'm sorry, I didn't think you'd go that far. I didn't flinch. I didn't even sip my coffee. I didn't go far, I said quietly. I went fair. He nodded slowly. Looked down. Maybe finally he understood. On my way home, I stopped outside an old bakery. Emma, my sister, used to work here when we were teenagers. We hadn't spoken in 6 years, not out of anger, just distance. The slow erosion of connection when no one tries to bridge it. I sent her a message. Hey, I'm standing outside the bakery you used to love. I didn't want to drag you into any of this, but if you ever want to talk, I'm here. No expectations, I just miss you. I pressed send, not hoping, not expecting, just opening the door. For once, not trying to prove anything, just letting someone in. 3 days passed. No press calls, no lawyers, just a quiet kind of echo in the air. Like the house after the guests have left. For the first time in years, I wasn't fighting. Not to be believed, not to be heard, just living. And wondering what comes next when the war is over. But the wounds remain. It was Thursday when the message came. Emma, my sister. We hadn't spoken properly in over 6 years. I had sent her that message from the bakery. I didn't expect her to reply. I understood why she kept her distance. She had always played peacemaker, the one who smoothed things over even when it hurt her, especially when it hurt her. But then, her name lit up on my phone. Hey, I saw your message. I'm free Friday. Coffee? I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering, then typed, yes. Anytime. We met at a cafe halfway between her office and mine. She arrived exactly on time, as always. Hair in a low bun, no makeup, cardigan buttoned to the top. Emma had never been loud, never needed to be. Her presence was like a steady hand on your back. She ordered chamomile. I got my usual black coffee. For the first 5 minutes, we didn't talk about anything that mattered. Just safe things, the weather, work, the kind of conversation two strangers might have if they were pretending to be family. Then she asked, "Was it true? The audit? The recordings? Everything?" I didn't dramatize it. I didn't go into details. I just said, "Yes." She nodded slowly, eyes down. I always wondered, but I thought maybe I was just imagining it. You know how Mom can be. It's easy to doubt yourself when she says you're too sensitive enough times. I looked at her, saw the weariness in her expression, the weight of years spent suppressing her own discomfort just to keep the peace. "You weren't imagining it," I said gently, "and you didn't do anything wrong by staying out of it. I just couldn't anymore." Her eyes watered, but she didn't cry. Emma didn't cry easily. "I'm proud of you," she whispered, "not just for standing up to them, for surviving it." And suddenly, all those years of silence didn't matter. We weren't sisters divided by time anymore. We were just two women, older now, bruised but not broken, finding each other again through the cracks. That weekend, she came to my apartment for the first time in years. We made soup together, watched old movies, laughed about things that used to make us ache. She asked to see the letter from Grandpa. I let her read it. She held it with both hands, like something sacred. "He always liked you best," she said softly. "He saw me," I said. That was enough. Later that night, she found a photo tucked into one of my books. The two of us at age 8 and 11, dressed in matching sweaters we hated, grinning with our mouths full of missing teeth. She laughed. "We looked like chaos." "We were chaos," I said, "but we were together." Monday morning came. A letter arrived from the foundation's main donor, an elderly woman named Margaret Lewis. I'd never met her in person, but she donated every year since 1994. Inside was a handwritten note. "Claire, I heard what happened. Your grandfather once told me, the legacy we leave is not in the plaques, but in the people who refuse to give up on what's right. I'm proud to support the foundation again. As long as it's in your hands, keep going. M.L." I folded the note and placed it in a drawer beside Grandpa's letter. 2 different generations, same message. That night I went for a walk. Just me and the wind and the slow hum of streetlights flickering on. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't haunted by old arguments. I wasn't calculating my next offense. I was simply breathing. And I thought, maybe this is what's left after the fire. Not ashes, not ruins, but space. To rebuild, to heal, to begin again. 2 months later, the snow began to fall. Soft, slow, the kind that didn't rush to cover everything, just dusted the city in quiet. By then, the audit was complete. The board had voted unanimously to make my role permanent. Caleb had resigned to pursue other ventures, and my mother had issued a single formal statement to the press. 4 sentences long, cold, distant, impersonal. She hadn't spoken to me since, and somehow that didn't hurt the way I thought it would. The foundation was changing. We redirected half of our annual budget to grassroots programs, the kind that had always been labeled too small to matter. We created a transparency hub online. Staff who had quietly tolerated the old culture began to speak up, and people listened. For the first time, the mission didn't feel like a mask. It felt real. We weren't just repairing something broken. We were rebuilding something worth trusting. One morning, as I was reviewing grant applications, my assistant knocked softly and handed me a padded envelope. No return address, just my name, handwritten. Inside was a silver locket, simple, old. I recognized it instantly. My mother's from decades ago. I used to play with the clasp when I sat on her lap as a child. There was no note, just the locket. Inside, 2 tiny photos, one of me at age 4, one of her smiling, the way she used to before everything got complicated. I held it in my hand for a long time, not sure what it meant, not sure if it meant anything at all, but it made me wonder, not about forgiveness, about grace. That night, I met Emma at the same cafe where we'd reconnected. She brought cookies. I brought the locket. "Do you think it's a peace offering?" I asked. Emma took a sip of her tea, thought a moment. "I think it's the most she can do." "Do I have to accept it?" "No," she said, "but you can carry it if you want." I smiled. That sounded like Emma, and it sounded right. Because not everything broken needs fixing. Some things just need space, to be what they are, to stop hurting. Later that week, I stood on stage at the Foundation's winter benefit. It was the first time in 20 years that someone other than my mother gave the opening remarks. I wore a navy dress, no pearls, no script, just a folded note card with 5 bullet points. I looked out at the crowd, board members, donors, community leaders, and a few new faces that had never been invited to events like this before. I paused, then I spoke. My grandfather believed that legacy wasn't something we inherit, it's something we earn. For a long time, this foundation stood for names and buildings and formal dinners. But now we want it to stand for something quieter, something stronger. We want it to stand for action, for equity, for truth, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable. I ended the speech with a simple line. We are not who we've been. We are who we choose to be, starting now. Afterward, I didn't linger. I left before the last speech, walked alone through the cold city streets. My breath fogged in front of me and the snow glittered under the streetlights. I passed a bookstore still open late and ducked inside. It was warm, smelled like paper and wood and cinnamon. I browsed for nothing in particular, but I found a journal, thick pages, linen cover, empty, waiting. I bought it. At home, I opened to the first page, wrote 4 words in the top corner. Tell the quiet truth. That's what this story has been, I think. Not revenge, not retribution, not even justice. Just the quiet truth, told without apology, lived without permission, and finally, carried without shame. Claire didn't just survive her family's betrayal, she transformed it. Through silence, truth, and quiet strength, she reclaimed not just a foundation, but her own identity. This story wasn't about revenge. It was about rising, without shouting, about choosing integrity when others choose appearance. If you've ever been dismissed, ignored, or pushed to the edge, let Claire's journey remind you. You are allowed to speak. You are allowed to lead. And most of all, you are allowed to begin again. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And always, stand tall in your truth.